new Masechta today called Masechta Moed Kattan, which really in English means very simply the small holiday, the small festival. Meaning on Pesach and Sukkot, we've got the high holy day of the Yom Tov at the beginning and the end. And in the middle, the intermediate days are on the one called Chal HaMoed. Chol, weekday, Moed, holiday. So on the one hand, they're holidays, so they have a lot of the restrictions of the actual festival. On the flip side, they're a chol, they're a weekday, which allows you to do certain work. And this is the basic of the rule. Where there is something called a hefsid meruba, a great financial loss possible, you're allowed to work. You don't have to lose. You're allowed to go to work. But even with that rule of hefsid meruba, financial loss, if it requires what's known as a tircha yisera, great amount of exhaustion. Hold on, it's my father. Hello, Daddy. No. We're right here in the Lax and Bagel. Come in. Nobody's here. Okay, come to Lax and Bagel. We just got started. All right. Very good. So, again, hefsid meruba, a financial loss, allows us to work on the on the Chal HaMoed. But if it is a tircha yisera, a great burden, in other words, it's not simple work, but requires great amount of effort, even if there is a financial loss, you can't do it. So tircha yisera, extra work, exertion of work, knocks it out of the park, even if there's a financial loss. The third thing is that you can only work with regard to a financial loss, which is called, again, a hefsid meruba. But where for revach, meaning for profit, that you're not allowed to do. So for an example, in the case of the Gemara, to water a field, an irrigated field, meaning a field that if you don't water it will dry out, that you're allowed to do. But a field that's in the valley that gets natural rainwater, and that, yes, thank you so much. Appreciate it. But a field that's in the valley that gets natural rainwater, which will benefit extra from you irrigating it, that you're not allowed to do. Because it already gets more natural rainwater flowing down from the mountains into the valley. So there's no problem of worrying about the field drying out. I want to water it so that it grows even more robustly. That I'm not allowed to do. So these are the moving parts that we're going to discuss today. So says the Mishnah like this. Jerry, we're good? Jeff, we're good?
Good.
Good. Very good. I don't know what happened to my father. Okay. Okay. Mashkin beis hashulachim b'moed. Look at the you're allowed to water an irrigated field. Rashi says right on top, Sada shuhu omedes bahar, a field that is situated on a mountain, v'tzarich la'ashkoisei tamid, and you need to water it always. Mashkin oisei afilu b'chadash shemoed, you're allowed to water it even on chadash shemoed, l'fishu loy hefsid gadol, because it's a great loss of money otherwise if you don't. Tosfos says the same thing right on the top. Sada she'enoi misavekes b'mei gishamim, a field that doesn't get drunk up with rain, which therefore means you need to constantly irrigate it. And if you do not water it continuously, you will have a great loss. You're allowed to irrigate it on Chal HaMoed because of the great financial loss. So for an example, Jerry Abrams has in the Negev, where it does not rain a lot, his greenhouse, by definition, he would be allowed to water it. He would be allowed to water it. Good morning, Daddy. Salam alaikum. Coffee? Take it. Take a coffee. Regular coffee. So, in other words, we're just doing the top Tosfos over here. So, in other words, what Jerry Abramson in the Negev, in a greenhouse, is actually required to water his greenhouse, Sai in Chodesh Nisan by Pesach, which is the time of growing, when you've just plowed and sowed. Well, maybe not in the Negev, but
no milk.
Yeah.
You said no sugar, no anything. So
okay. Thank you. But the point here is, this is what it is. Again, it's a hefsid meruba, a great financial loss. What it's not is no tircha yisera. It's not a great burden. Okay? Because all you do is you turn it on. In this case, we're talking about a flowing canal, which you're connected to your field, and it's all good. Okay? So that's the first line in the Mishnah. Mashkin Beis Shluchim b'Moed, you can go and water an irrigated field. Beis Shluchim means a field that's irrigated on a mountain that does not have natural rainwater. Ubishvius, and you're allowed to do this b'Moed ubishvius. You're allowed to do this both on Chal HaMoed, the intermediate days, and on the 7th year of Shavias, even though you're not allowed to sow, to plant, or to plow, as it were, on Shavias. Nonetheless, you don't have to let your fields, you have to leave your fields fallow, but you don't have to allow them to dry up and get ruined. That we're not going to ask you to do. Whether it is a canal that's a brand new canal, which means its walls are not strong yet. Those walls have not been baked yet. So we have a reasonable worry that the walls will collapse, and therefore I may have to dig it out, which would obviously be an undue burden, which I'm not allowed to do no matter what. Whether it's not a new canal, it's an old canal, that you're allowed to do. But because it's not going to fall, which of course the question is, if I told you that I'm allowed to use one that allows me to, that's a brand new one that might fall, obviously I'm allowed to use the one that's not going to fall, the not new one. So the Gemara is going to ask that question. But we do not irrigate, but we do not water for even an irrigated field from a pool of rainwater or from water from a well, which requires you to schlep the water, to bring up the water. It's standing water and have to carry the water to your field. And you're not allowed to make ditches around the roots of grapevines to collect rainwater. Why? The answer for this is, while if you don't do this, and this is your only water source, you will be ruining the field, right? You will be ruining the field because it needs to be irrigated. Since it requires a tircha yisera, greater amount of exertion, no good. This halacha, by the way, is only with regard to Chal HaMoed, not Shavias. Because on Shavias, the 7th year, there's no rule of extra burden. There's no rule of a tircha yisera, an extra burden. There's only a rule, right, as we're going to see later on. So this rule is actually only applies to Chal HaMoed. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah you're not allowed to dig a new irrigation canal during Chal HaMoed or on Shvius. You should have done it before. The Chachamim no. But with regard to Shemitah, you are allowed to dig a new irrigation canal because it happens. Shemitah is a whole year. Stuff happens. It's okay. and you're allowed to repair damaged ones during Chol Hamoed. Because we say, since the canal is already there and all you're really doing is clearing it out, that's not a big enough burden to override the financial loss that may be coming your way. So now we're on 2AB. You'll notice already, by the way, this Gemara is a complete change from the previous few Masechtas. This is more like your regular Gemaras and the rest of the Shas. Very halachic driven, very technical in its understanding. Now, in the public thoroughfare, that changes everything. For the needs of the community, one is allowed to repair damaged cisterns in the public domain. And you're even allowed to clean them out. Zakrash is look at little Taisvis, the second Taisvis. She'im nismala bar mutal lechatay. If the bar gets filled up, you're allowed to clean it out. Lahamika sheba'avetinach. You're allowed to dig out the dirt that fell into it. But to dig it out originally, in other words, to make a citron in the first place, and where the ground, of course, is hard, and you have to dig it out to create an in-ground citron. That's what I wanted to show you guys, the words. That's the first words when you see the word tircha yisera. A great people need it. It's true, but where the work is so, I'm going to have to bring a hoe and dig it up. I'm not willing to do. Okay, and back to the Mishnah.
You're willing to do, but that's
what I'm saying. Exactly. You're allowed to repair the roads and the streets, the mikvahs, the ritual baths, and tend to all the needs of the rabbim. Again, on Yontif, on Chol Hamoed, because it's the regalim, it's the regel, it's the pilgrimage. One of the pilgrimages to go up to Yerushalayim. There's a great need for this. We mark the graves so that the kahanim and the chaverim who only eat food bitahara, with not contaminated, only in a state of purity, will not walk over a grave, an unmarked grave. This is one of the reasons, the basic reason, that we put up a matzeva on a grave. The other reason, of course, is for remembrances, but the first reason is for this. The yoitzin ab ala kalayim, and the shluchei bezdin, the agents of the court, go out specifically in Nisan. This is why I mentioned this before. In Chol Hamoed Nisan, because in Adar is the time of planting, and this is when the grain starts sprouting from the ground. And since you're not allowed to have kalayim, what is kalayim? Kalayim is like shatnez. In other words, having two species growing near each other. As we've talked many times before, the Torah HaKadoshah does not like multiculturalism. Doesn't like everybody becoming one. It doesn't like it because it doesn't like groupthink. Think of the Tower of Babel, right? Where everybody spoke one language.
That a man should say that he's a woman.
That part too, exactly. And in other words, it doesn't like it because when everybody starts thinking alike, you end up with a canceled society. And when everybody thinks alike, the worst parts of human condition come out. Okay? What do you call it? You might want to listen to the vart that I sent out last night, which explains this parasha from the idea of the Stockholm syndrome, where the victims take on, feel these good needs to the victors, and explains a lot about what's going on in this parasha. Anyways, so what happens is, since they start sprouting then, by definition, then that's when the agents go out, even on Chol Hamoed, because it's not a lot of work, and that's when the time comes to rip out one of those things that are growing so they don't grow together. Jerry, l'chaim, delicious. The problem with being in Lox and Bagel is that Jerry doesn't know how to say no, as usual. Suck the Gemara.
Yeah, it's always wondering.
Yeah.
we would have had to use a mule.
Right.
Because a mule is a product of a
mixture, right?
I wonder if it's allowed for a Jew to use a mule.
You're allowed.
As a pack animal.
No, we are allowed to use a mule.
We
are allowed to use it.
It's good.
We are not. It didn't want, but it doesn't matter. Once it's there, you're allowed to use it. There's no issue in it being used, but you wouldn't be allowed to plow with it with something else. You can plow only with a horse. With a horse that you don't have to.
Even with a mule, might be a problem.
Exactly. It's part horse and it's part something else. Right? The Gemara talks about it in other places. Let's do the Gemara. Says the Gemara. Hashta now. Yesh laim ma'ayin shiyotza b'tchila. Okay. Hashta yesh laim ma'ayin shiyotza b'tchila. Now, if we just said in our Mishnah, if a new emerged spring springs up, we said the osilin pule, where we worry about that the walls have not been baked and the walls could collapse. Mashkin, we still say that you're allowed to water the irrigated field on the Chalamoyed. Then obviously, a maya, meaning a canal that's not brand new, that's walls are completely baked, right? The walls are completely baked, so we're not worried about it collapsing. We're not worried about it collapsing. It's obvious that, of course, why does the Mishnah have to say, Bein mayin sheyotze b'tchila, bein mayin shelo yotze b'tchila? We know that the Mishnah is always mitzamtz and keeps its words very close to the best. So what's going on? Says the Gemara, Amra Itzich. We're going to say extra words, because otherwise, every extra word we learn something out of it. We use our big thumb over here to take something out of it. So what's the thing here? Amri Itzich. If I had taught only about a brand new canal where the walls might collapse, I would have said, I might have said that's why an irrigated field I'm allowed to water, but a non-irrigated field, meaning a field that's in the valley, that gets natural rainwater, I'm not allowed to water it, because we're worried about the walls of the spring of the canal falling in. So with regard to a field that has a hefsed veruba, that has a great financial loss because it doesn't have its own natural water system, right there you're allowed, but a field that has its own natural rainwater, I'm not allowed, not because I'm not allowed, only because I'm afraid that it's a new canal and it might collapse, which means that an old canal where the walls are already baked, I should even be allowed to water a field that gets natural rainwater. What does that mean? That means I would be allowed to on Chalamoid, not just to make sure I don't have a financial loss, but even where I have a field that gets natural rainwater, I would be allowed to use water, irrigated water, where it gives me revach, where it gives me profit. It helps fulfill. Why? In other words, it's only profit because you're not going to lose because you have water raining down on you from the mountains. But what you're going to do is add irrigated water that will help it grow even more robustly. That's what I would say to here. But regarding not a new one, an old one, where the walls are baked and it's not going to collapse, I might have said that even a rain-filled in the valley field, which doesn't need my water, I'm allowed to go ahead and irrigate it for revach, for profit. Kamash malon. Only an irrigated field where there is a hefsed meruba, where I'm afraid I'm going to have a great financial loss because if I don't water it, the field's going to dry out. But in a base habal, even though it's an old spring and I'm not worried about it collapsing, no, I'm not allowed to because I'm not allowed to do it because I'm not allowed to have a game. Says the Gemara, by the way, as a matter of editing, my mashra the high base of shalachim lishna ditzakusi, How do I know that the word Beis HaShalochin means an expression of thirst that it requires water? You were faint and exhausted. And with Targumim and the Onkelos explains, the word mishale, you were mishale and exhausted, which means it means you were faint. You were faint. So that tells us that means that has to do with thirstiness. And Maishna, the high base habal lishna are interchangeable. Right. Yes, that's true. My grandmother, and if you remember, could not say a ches. So my sister Chani, by my grandmother, was Hanala. Hanala. Exactly. My master, the high bow is my svusihi. How do I know the base about means settled? Meaning it has automatic water system. It doesn't require your irrigation. This is very funny. As a young man lives with a basula, with a virgin, so does your children live with you. And we explain this in Targum. As a young man settles down with a virgin, so will your children settle with you. Marriage, and the word, in other words, marriage is settling you down. And the word mistoisiv is the word that we come to about. Yishuv Adas. Oh, very good. I didn't realize that. Yishuv Adas. Settling of the mind. Very good. I missed that. Nice. Your part? Your part? You thought of that? Nice.
It comes naturally.
Daddy, naturally, you have to add that to your future safer. So now we're on 283. 283. So who's the Tana? My Tana to say the in Harevachaloi. Who is the Tana that says if it's an irretrievable financial loss, yes, you're allowed to water on Chalamoid, the irrigated field, but for the sake of a profit, one is not allowed to perform the labor. That means even if I have an old canal that's not going to collapse, I'm not allowed to use it for a rain-filled field. And a second piece, that even on a field that's irrigated, that requires irrigation, if you have to take it from a place of sitting water and you have to schlep the water out of the well and carry it to your field, you can't do it even in the case of a major financial loss, right? Because at the end of the day, Tircha Yisera overrides everything else.
I don't know if it would be a very major financial loss. I think that Lord would give you a head.
So my father, speak up a little. This is Jeff Kaderi.
Oh, I didn't see that.
There, Jeff. Hi, Jeff. There you go. So my father asked the question. He would say that in a great financial loss, one would assume that the Chazal would give you somehow a head. But the problem with that is the idea of a fire that happens on Shabbos. In the case of a fire that happens on Shabbos, the rule is you're not allowed to extinguish the fire if you're only looking at a total loss of your house. Even if it's a great and utter financial loss, you shouldn't, obviously, Hashem should never send it to us because it would be a great, terrible, it'd be very hard to hold back. Now, if financial, you're allowed to put water around, and if the fire gets to the water, it will extinguish, but you're not allowed to put water on the fire. Having said that, even in a Hefsem Maruva. Now, in the case of a fire, all of us, let's say, who live in Boca Grove, or you live in Padero, there you would be allowed to take out the fire most likely because, forget about financial, the houses are so close to each other and they're all made out of wood. You were dealing with at least suffix sakonis, not just for yourself. You might be able to pull your family out of the house, but how are you going to pull all the other families out of the house, right? It just doesn't work that way. There, you would obviously have to do it. And but if a house is isolated by itself, you actually have to allow it to burn to the ground.
Like in California,
for forest fires, yeah, it's separate. And right, much further apart. So, Who's the Tana? That's why, Daddy, I'm not sure about this. And by the way, my father put his finger on something else. Are these rules of Chala Moed, of the intermediate days, are they biblical in nature or are they rabbinical in nature? It's a big machlokes rishonim because the Torah doesn't clearly say anything. But as we're going to see in the Gemara, the Gemara ties through psukim, through verses, Chala Moed back to the Yontif itself. So is it biblical, or is it only in Asmach that the Rabbanon are doing it, and on Rabbanon you would be more maker?
Yeah.
Right. It's all Rabbanon. So that's the question. Shavias today is only with the Rabbanon, though as we get to it, that may not be true today. We'll talk about that in a minute. Right. But we're going to talk about it. Okay, so let's get to it. I just want to bring it up. It's a big machlokes rishonim buried in Rashi and Tosfos, and there's a lot of talk on it. What exactly are we dealing with here? Amar Rav Huna, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. The Tana is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. It's not. We learned. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, on Chol Moed, if water pools by one tree, for some reason, you're allowed to move the water from one tree to another tree so that all the trees get water so that they survive. But you can't water the field entire because you're not allowed to go and get a profit out of it. You can't do it forever to keep the field alive and the trees alive. It's one thing, but to go and save it, because a tree would be a loss. It requires great amount of rain, but the field as a whole is not the issue. So you see, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, no proof. Where does Rabbi Eliezer say that you're not allowed to do things for profit on Chol Moed? Where but where do you see that he says anything about excessive tircha? Maybe he allows you to do some where it's not a profit. It's only to a hefsim meruba to protect you from a financial loss. We said that if it's a big law, if it's a big tircha, if it's a big exertion, you're still not allowed to do it. From Rabbi Eliezer's words, you don't see that. You maybe don't see that. El Amar Papa Hamani Rabbi Yehudi. It's Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya we learn. New spring. Rameya says, even though it's a new field, a spring, and we're worried about its walls collapsing, he says, you know what? You could still even water not just a field that needs irrigation, but even a field that has natural water from the mountains and rain. Why does Rameya say this? Because Rameya goes to something we've talked about before. Once I permit something, I have to permit it completely. You remember Hillel with regard to Tzarech Achila, right, on Yom Tov, that once I open the door a little bit, the door is open completely. That has to be the reason. Exactly. So that's got to be Rameya's pshat. At least I think so.
That's why he's called Rameya Balanes.
Nice. That's why. Or Rameya, right? He was a good guy, Rameya. And Rameya means Rameya is an unbelievable leniency. He has no problems with anything. Rabbi Yehuda says, give me a second, I gotta see who's trying to reach me. Just give me 1 second. A second. Okay, no, we're good. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda says, Ein mashkin elis sedei beis hashulachim b'charba. One may only water an irrigated field that dried up. So now he tightens up. Now, what does that mean, dried up? Okay, the Gemara is going to jump all over that extra word now. Shecharva, that dried up. But right now, ignore that word for a minute. He says, like we've been learning till like our Mishnah, that what? You're allowed to water something that needs it so that it doesn't dry up. Meaning a field that's irrigated. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, not this, not that. What does that mean? Gemara is going to explain. Yes, Seral Cain, over and above the stringency that he already said that only an irrigated field is allowed to be watered on Chalamoid. Rabbi Yehuda, he adds, one is not allowed to clean out an irrigation canal and water from it his garden or his ruin on Chalamoid. And again, the Gemara is going to talk about it. What are we talking about? Well, let's see. Towards the field. But the question really is, that shouldn't be a problem. Right. The problem is of how much exertion this is. Is it too much exertion or not? My charva. First of all, what did the word dry up? When Yehuda just said you can water a base of shalachim shecharva that dried up. That it literally dried up, it's cracked, and nothing is growing there. Then what do I allow? Why should you be allowed to water it on Kalamoid? Right? Once it dries up, that's it. The field's dead. It can't grow any further. So why would I be allowed to water it, even if it's a base of shalachim? So Abaye explained Shechava means that this spring, the spring you've been using the whole time, the canal dried up. The Yatzala Mayanach, and a new spring emerged from it, popped up, a new one watered. Right? Rabbi Yehuda says, even though it's new and the walls might collapse, for a field that requires water, otherwise it will be a great financial loss, you're allowed to use it. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, loy kach v'loy kach. Not this, not that. Meaning, loy shena charav meyana, loy shena loy charav meyana. No matter whether the original spring dried up or the spring did not dry up. In both cases, we're now on 2A4. Both cases, any newly emerged spring is not allowed to be used. So now it looks like our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, right? Rabbi Yehuda who says that an irrigated field is allowed to be watered from the what do you call even a new spring. So says the Gemara, who says that Atana is Rabbi Yehuda? Dilma Akan like Rabbi Yehuda Beis HaShalachim in Beis HaBaaloi.
When you had a dry creek,
right?
Then a new one comes.
Right.
So it should really be the pillow, right?
Right, it is, right.
So how can we not worried about the fever? So the answer is because it uses the same channel that the old one had.
Oh,
so
very good.
So therefore the walls are strong.
Right, but
so therefore you don't consider it like
too much. Too much,
right.
But still, you have the accelerate. Otherwise, you run into the
it's a new one.
It's a new one, right? So the answer is only it's partially new.
Right,
the partially new. We're not going to worry about it.
The
channel itself, right?
Strong.
So says the Gemara. Thank you, Dan. That's exactly the shot.
No, because
otherwise it makes no sense. You go back to the thing. Very good. So it means that the new arm is new, but it flows into the old arm, which is old. So the amount of collapse that might happen will not be a tikkun. But if it does happen, it's not a tikkun. It's not a tikkun. You say right. Mimai. Dilma Adkan like Rabbi Yehuda Beis HaShalachim in Beis HaBaaloi. Where does Rabbi Yehuda say? Maybe perhaps Rabbi Yehuda is only saying that an irrigated field could be watered, but a rain-covered field that cannot be watered. From these words, you might have learned with your thumb that only a brand new spring, a brand new canal cannot be used. We're now on Amid Beis. Amid Beis. Because it might collapse. But an old canal which will not collapse, even an irrigated field, even a rain field should be allowed to be watered, meaning that even Rabbi Yehuda would say that even if where there is no hefsin meruba, there's no financial loss of it drying up, there's only revach profit, you're allowed to do it. It's all the only thing we worry about is tircha yisera.
We don't know.
I'm saying, but the only thing we would worry about, and this is the point, the only thing we would worry about is extra exertion. But if there's no extra exertion and I don't have to worry about it collapsing, therefore, what's the issue? But an old canal, the law that likely will not collapse. I feel based nami could be done, and even though there's no hefsim, there's no financial loss, nonetheless, the revach, you're a lot of profit. So says the Gemara, the basic question. Okay, I agree We don't have a clarity who's the Tana of our Mishnah, who's the author of our Mishnah. In K, Mastisin Amai Tirm Yono. Who are you going to attribute our Mishnah to? We've ran out of people that you can attribute the Mishnah to. Elul Rabbi Yehuda. Let's stick to Rabbi Yehuda. No matter in a newly emerged spring or a spring that is not newly emerged but it's old, I'm so sorry. Hang on 1 second. Simi, I'm giving shear. Everything okay? Fine, I'll call you back. Okay. Beisa shalochin in an irrigated field is allowed to be watered. Beis habal loy. But a field that gets natural rainwater, no, you're not allowed to. Bahai diktoni habal, bahai diktoni shiyotze nayin shiyotze betchila. The reason that the Brisa taught the case deliberately by a new spring, which seemed to tell us that by a spring that is old, that we're not worried about it collapsing, that you're allowed to use it. I might have done to teach me the power of Rameya. That Rameya was such a leniency that even a new spring that might collapse, since I allow it for a field that requires irrigation, once I allow it, I'm mutal that. So now look at the second. So look at Taisvis, the second little Taisvis. The little Taisus. So Taisus asked the question, listening why are you pointing out to teach us Rabbi Yehuda, to teach us Rabbi Meir that he's such a leniency? Say that it comes to teach us the koyach of Rabbi Yehuda, that he's such a machmir. He's a machmir that only that you can't water no matter what, from what he called the field that gets automatic rainwater. Because, the reason is, the koyach, the hetera, odif. The Gemara is coming to teach us, a rabbi that comes to tell you something is osir, is forbidden, that's easy. If you find a rabbi that has the kionis, to tell you that no, it's good, it's mutter, it's allowed. The Gemara goes out of its way. The koyach teirah, the power of a lenient rabbi, that's much greater.
You know why?
Because it's much harder to say it's okay than to say no.
Because if he's matter, that means he knows.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who doesn't know,
he's not going to matter.
He's matter.
So this is the famous story.
That's why that Moshe Feinstein was able to say something is mutter. In many Rabbanim would say,
so the greater example, my father brought the example of Rav Moshe. I bring the example of the Kalvesberger Rav, Rabbi Cheskel Roth, Zecher Tzadik L'Bracha, who in Barpag was one of the Paiskei Adar, and he was very involved in women questions, in blood questions, and he was famous for permitting. I got to him because my Rebbe Rabelsky, I had a question and he couldn't answer it, and he sent me to this Hasidic Rav. So the joke they used to say is, Rav Chatzkel Roth was getting a ride with somebody in a car, and the guy came to a red light and he stopped. Rav Chatzkel picked up his eyes, said, you can go. Got it? Even though it looked red.
Right.
Even though it said like this, that's the joke. The joke was that where everybody else saw red, and everybody else said, no, you can't be with your wife, he would say, no, you don't worry about this, you're allowed to be with your wife. So the joke was, he got to a red light, he said, don't worry about it, Memei in Yiddish, Memei guy, that's how we used to do it, like this. Memei guy, Sweden.
Sold the ticket.
That's it. We don't even worry. The Nebbis don't get tickets. Anyways, so here we go. So let's just go a little further over here. Okay? We're gonna stop in a few minutes. We're just gonna find a place of it's 9:00 and it's Friday. And okay, Itmar. And then we got to talk about Shabbos. When do we want to learn? Itmar. One who weeds and one who waters seeds on the Shabbos. So you got two things going on here. You're weeding, which is an act of plowing, and you're watering seeds, which is an act of planting. Now, you have to give a warning, right? In order to get a punishment, you have to be warned for it. Hasra has to be definitive. And what are you going to warn him? Plowing. Sowing, planting. My opinion is more reasonable. Just like the normal manner of plowing is to soften the earth. The act of weeding softens the earth. My thing is more reasonable. Just like the normal manner of planting is to promote the growth of produce. Here, weeding and watering promotes the growth of produce. By the way, tangentially, we say in davening, Matzmiach Keren Yeshua, the blossoming of the Keren Yeshua. So we could say that the weeding and watering of Golus helps bring about the Matzmiach of the Keren Yeshua, the blossoming of the Yeshua. Okay, so Amalei Abaye L'Rabbo. Both of you guys got problems. According to you, Rabba, that it's about what do you call it? That it's about chayrish plowing. You got a problem. Mishum chayrishim, mishum zarei aloi. You're only going to warn him about plowing, but you're not going to warn him about sowing, planting. Warn him about both. Where's the question about the warning? Just give him. Say it's either plowing or growing. But either way. Ula Rabbi Yosef Kasha. And according to Rabbi Yosef, it's the same question. 2b2. Mishum Zereya in Mishum Chayrish Shloi. Because of sowing, yes, but the plowing, no. If you're going to say if you're going to say where there's a choice of which malacha to say to warn him about, whenever there are two forbidden actions, two forbidden labors, Shabbos labors that are taking place simultaneously, you only are over on one malacha, and therefore only one is definite, and therefore the warning has to be a definite warning. It can't be a broad warning with both of them. No. So if one prunes the vine, and also one needs the wood for fuel, needs to bring two chatas offerings. One for planting, because by pruning you are going ahead and cultivating planting. And one for reaping, obviously. So the Gemara, you see, you could warn for both. The Gemara says, Kasha, it's a good question. And the Gemara stops right over there. Kasha means that there is an answer, but you'd have to shoehorn it in. And you could answer. You could say, the action is both. Here you're dealing with, in essence, two different actions. Weeding is one thing. Seeding is another thing. So actually, it's not simultaneous. Cutting the branch is simultaneous. I'm pruning, and I'm having it in mind already for my fuel. So in essence, it's more simultaneous. Here, it's not simultaneous. But the answer is because I'm pulling out the weeds, right, and then I'm putting in the seeds. So it's two different
seeds are there. It's
watering the seeds. You'll read what it said.
You had already something else. It was
read here. One who weeds and one who waters seeds on the Shabbos. It's two different things actually going on here. Who weeds and who waters.
When you're weeding, you're allowing the other plants to grow better. So it's like Zorea.
It's
because you're causing it to grow better.
That's okay. You could say
the same thing when you add water, you're causing the seed
to grow. So the point to that is that's planting. Of course, I said it's a kasha. You could come up with an answer, but the reason why the Gemara doesn't come up with an answer
field and he was weeding.
Exactly. In other words, the point here is
it was an empty field that nothing was growing at that point.
So
maybe he was weeding.
No. And he was putting seeds.
He was putting a new seed in.
Right into where he weeded. He put it into the new seeds.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's what we're talking about.
It is in essence some of it. You pull up the weed and put in the cess.
He's weeding to help it grow.
Right.
See, but again, I'm answering. The Gemara applied for the kasha. I'm saying when the Gemara says kasha, that means that you could find an answer.
When there is no answer, the Gemara says
to you. There is an answer. We've just talked about some of the answers, but they're shoehorned in. You can see where the problems with the answers would be. Exactly what my father is asking. Yes, but no, I can tell you the case isn't this. So therefore, we believe with the kasha. Let's just finish up over here. Okay, I got needed. No, I just want to go a little further. Just a little further. We're going to do another 5 minutes. If one is pulling out weeds and one is covering seeds in the earth, and therefore he fosters the growth of 2 different produce and creating client like he gets malchus. Rabbi Akiva, even more. He does nothing. Listen to this. He sees it growing. He lets it grow, and he doesn't pull it out. He's not active in pulling it. He gets what? And yet does he get going to Rabbi Akiva? I love shame by my lob shame by my say like it. I got a lob that doesn't have a what do you call it? Oh, you're getting give me a second. Whoop. Okay, sorry about that. Jerry got a call from a likely scam. Okay, so now this is what we're going to see. According to me, that I say that pulling the weeds is a warning of sowing, of planting. That's why one who pulls weeds in a field of kalayim, fostering the growth of kalayim, is liable because of kalayim. But according to you, that talks about plowing the field on Shabbos. What do you call about pulling the weeds on the field on Shabbos, which is plowing. By plowing, is there anything wrong with plowing by climb? Climb is the growth of 2 produce, not the plowing. Obviously, when you plow, nothing is planted yet. First you plow, and then you plow, and then you see. Amalei Mishum Mikayim. He's saying you're over because of kalayim. Of course, the problem with that is it's a lav shem by Maisa. It's a prohibition that doesn't have an action. A prohibition that doesn't have an action, we don't have a malchus. No, Mikayim. No. Mishum Mikayim. You're just watching it grow and you're doing nothing. So what is the pshat? For the Tani Sefer, but here comes the Sefer, Rabbi Kiva Af Mikayim. Rabbi Kiva says in Mikayim, Lechal the Tanakama at the beginning, Lam Mishum Mikayim, who is not on Mikayim. Says the Gemara, Kula Rabbi Kiva, my Tamakama. Rabbi Kiva is coming to explain. My Tama Menachas Mechabs Mikayim Loika. Why do you give lashes when one who weeds and covers the seeds and fosters the growth of Klayim? Mishum Mikayim, because you're maintaining the Klayim. Rabbi Kiva Mikayim, because Rabbi Kiva holds that even if you do nothing, you get and you just leave, you get marks. Now, why is that? My time with the Rabbi Kiva Titania. You feel you should not sow Kalayim. That we're now on 2B3, and this is where we're going to stop. What do you call it? This is where you do an action. Where do I know that even if you just maintain, you're liable for malchus? Because normally a prohibition that has no action, the rule is you don't get malchus. Talmud loyma, this is why he doesn't hold of it. Kalayim sadcha loy. Take a look at number 21, the pasuk. Behemtecha loy sabia kalayim sadcha loy sizra kalayim. You'll notice it repeats itself. It really could have said behemtecha usadcha radical loy sibra. We don't need the word loy twice in the pasuk. Second loy is coming to tell us you're connecting that even if don't cultivate kalayim, not just don't plant it, don't cultivate it. Turns out it's a gezeres hakosuf, says Rabbi Akiva. So even though there's no action, you still get malchus. This is where we're gonna talk. We're gonna stop right over here.